Hey guys, Nebraska Farm Boy here, and today we're going to be making a knife specifically because I wanted to make a knife. Now, today we're going to be making a 3.5-inch blade. I'm not sure quite what I'm going to do with it yet, but got some good steel here. It's off part of some old blade off of something. I don't know, some kind of a scraper. I don't know. It's really good high carbon steel. So I'm going to make 3.5-inch knife blade of some sort. I hope to kind of show you a little bit more in detail the methods I use for making knives with angle grinders, because that's the only tool I really use besides files and some hand tools and maybe the bench grinder. So basically those little things, all those tools that you'll find around the farm anyway. So you'll find scrap metal around the farm, you'll find angle grinders around the farm, so you should be able to learn something and get started with knife building. Now the first thing you're gonna really want is a good vise, because that's a lifesaver, like literally a lifesaver. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to measure out the piece that we're going to cut off of here. So I got my ruler here. Generally I like to make my knives about, just under an inch thick. We've already got a mark there, just under an inch. And then we'll bring it over to here, to here. And we'll run this and make a straightish line, like so. Alrighty. Now along this, it's really hard to get a straight line with an angle grinder, cutoff wheel, and whatnot. So you can actually assist yourself with a piece of straight metal. Right? Maybe that's obvious, but it took me a long time to figure that out. And I was always making crooked cuts. So if that was helpful, yay for that. If it wasn't, okay, we'll move on. And then you can remove that piece that you're using as a guide after you've got the first line scored, because now you can make a straight line from there. Alrighty, there we go. To save yourself a little bit of cutoff wheel, you can take it only until you can leave a little bit of material there and then break it off with the hammer. And that piece was hot, so you want to also be cooling off your blades every once in a while. So I like to have this bucket of water here, because if you get your blades too hot, then you'll soften your steel up. And I have to admit, I don't really do heat treats. I prefer to find steel that I don't have to heat treat. And this particular steel seems to hold a decent edge without a heat treat, so I don't worry too much about it. If I'm a bad person, that's too bad. Let's make knives. Alright, so looks like we're gonna have to do a little bit of cleanup around the outside of this here blade. So I'll use an old grinding wheel, because when you're beveling in your knife, you want to use a new, fresh grinding wheel. But for this cleanup and for profiling out your knife, you can use an old grinding wheel. Alrighty, pretty well cleaned up. Ouch, kind of hot. Okay, you'll burn yourself a few times making knives, but that's the joy of making knives. Alrighty, so what we're gonna do now is figure out what kind of a knife I want to make. Alrighty, so I think I'll just make a pretty normal looking knife for today. That you can never have enough of those 3.5-inch fixed blades. They just come in handy all over the place. You know, might give it away, I don't know what I'll do with this. But I'm just gonna put kind of a normal sort of drop point, I think you'd call it, on here. First, I'll have to mark out where my 3.5 inches ends. So this will have a 3.5-inch blade, and then it will have a, let's see, what did that come out to? Just under 4-inch handle, which is just perfect for this kind of a knife. Now, this is really nice thick metal, really nice. Super great throwing metal, you know, good weight for making throwing knives. Then I'll come down here. I'll probably start my drop at about 1 inch, and then I like to always have my blade straight right up to where the point comes up to, not the center of the blade, but a little bit up past there. That's just my personal preference for making a blade. Yeah, that'll be nice. That has a nice gradual slope, great for throwing, great for piercing, like for work and for self-defense and all that good stuff. Now that drop looks pretty awkward right now on when you have it like that, but once we start grinding, I'll just kind of grind until I think it looks good. That's the way I like to do things. Alrighty, so for profiling in, put this back in here so in a way that I can see my design. I'll start out this way. We'll flip it around to the other side eventually. That's besides the point. And my vise is broken, so I'll give this a tap with the hammer so that gets out of my way. And then we can start profiling in, still using this old grinding wheel. Actually, just because I think I'll start out with the cutoff wheel to cut off some of the bulk of that material. Alright, so what I'm going to do first, well, the first thing I'm going to do is find my permanent marker and this mess on the table. Your table will get messy if you're making knives. Then I'm going to run this marker along the edge of what's going to be the edge of this knife, so that I can have something that I can see, this mark that I'm going to make, so that I can know where the middle of this edge is, so that I can know where to stop my grinding. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we got a drill bit that is roughly the same width as this metal, as close as I can get it to, and we're going to run that so that the middle of this drill bit gives us our center line. And it looks like that's pretty close to center. And then I'll take it the other way and we'll have, what we'll have left is two very faint lines that I don't think you can probably see on camera. And then we'll have a little bit of meat left in the middle so that I don't go too far. Alright, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to take my caliper, which does not have a battery, but that doesn't matter, and I'm going to use it to help me mark out an even line for my bevels, where to end them. And this one's going to be pretty long, as you can see, because this is thick metal. That should give me pretty even bevel lines. And now we know where to bring our lines to on both sides. Alrighty? Alright, so getting started with beveling. There's a couple of things you have to understand. When using an angle grinder, it's different, though very similar actually, to using a bench grinder, or sorry, I meant belt grinder, belt sander, what have you. It's just reversed, okay? So when you're using a belt sander, like you see on YouTube all the time, the pros use them. They're bringing their knife along. The belt, which is taking off material. Instead, we're bringing the disc along the knife to take off material. It's really the same concept. I've never actually used the belt sander, but I think that this might actually be a good way to get started. And people on YouTube are always making these big old ugly knives that really have not that great of bevels. But what you gotta understand is you can make a small knife with an angle grinder. There's no difference between making using an angle grinder and a belt sander. You can make a perfectly good knife with an angle grinder. Granted, my knives are still needing improvement and whatnot, but that's just because I'm not as good of a knife maker as they are. You don't let your tools limit you. That's essentially what I'm trying to say. So essentially, what we're going to do here is I'm going to start out with my old grinder disc, and I'm going to start out by using the edge of it so that I can take off the more material than I could using it flat. And I'm going to bring it down. I'm going to bring my bevels down to my bevel line. Sorry, I'm not using the correct terms, I don't think. But you get the point. And so I'm going to bring a sharp bevel down, and then I'm going to go from there and we'll gradually bring it up to this top line up here. And then I'm going to switch at some point in there to my fresh grinding wheel so that I can get a nice smooth bevel. Alrighty, so I got this knife done and I am pleased as punch with it. I wrapped the handle in some electrical tape. It was a little bit wonky on that part there. I might have to redo that. I didn't bother to show you doing that because it's pretty simple. Just wrap it in electrical tape. It makes a pretty nice handle, really. Good grip and all that stuff. Otherwise, I also ran it over with the wire brush on the angle grinder. Gives it a real nice finish, kind of rust-proofs it, or I should say makes it rust-resistant. It's not rust-proof. This is high-carbon steel, which is awesome. Anyways, it's definitely not a perfectly smooth bevel, but granted, you aren't going to get a perfectly smooth bevel if you aren't going to sand your knives. And I don't sand my knives because I like to have that rough bevel because this is a handmade knife and I want people to know it. To sharpen it up, I use my work sharp, just kind of the normal way you sharpen knives on the work sharp. Start with the green belt, or granted, you don't normally use the green belt on knives, but for homemade knives, you start with the green belt, go to the red belt, go to the gray belt until you're ready, until it's sharp, then you kind of touch it up on the butcher's steel and all that good stuff. Anyways, pretty simple. If you sharpen knives on a work sharp, you know how to sharpen a homemade knife. It's a pretty fun thrower. It's small, it's not my favorite, I'd say, but is the smallest thrower I have, and it does throw well. It really does, and it hits hard, and I think that, just guessing, I think it would achieve full penetration on a bad guy target. Just my guess. If he doesn't have loose clothing. But anyways, I'm not talking about knife throwing for self-defense. We did another video on that. Anyways, so yeah, you can make these knives super simple. This only took me about 2 hours to make. It's a really fun way to get started into knife making. Make a knife like this. You can make any kind of knife you want. Make it the way you like it. Granted, start with a simple build. The first knife second knife I tried to make was a dagger. I thought that would be simple. I don't know what I was doing. Anyways, if you make a single edge, cool, sort of a Skinner style knife like this, you're bound to have a lot of fun. And yeah, I guess that's all there is to it. So I guess I'll stop rambling and wasting your time, so you can get started on making that knife. Without any further ado, you've been watching Nebraska Farm Boy, and we will see you next time.